Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here. I'm Marie-Noëlle Wurm. I'm an artist, an illustrator, and also a top teacher on Skillshare where I teach about creativity and how to unleash it and tap into it and really get out of your own way so that you can reveal the creative part that lives inside you. Because I really believe that every single one of us has a wealth of creativity within us, and it's just about trying to find ways to reconnect with those parts that are inherent to each and every one of us. In my personal work, I like to create art that is delicate, kind of dreamlike, and sometimes has a touch of darkness in it. I am very inspired by nature, natural forms, anything that relates to the natural world, because I feel like it holds so much complexity and beauty within it that really encapsulates all the contradictions of human experience. I'm super excited to have been invited by Peggy to this creative retreat. We did this last year, and I'm just really excited to be getting creative with you today. Today we're going to be doing a class called Color, Creative Freedom, and All Your Senses. So bring out all your colors, whatever material it is you want, whether it's gouache or colored pencils or neocolors or watercolor, whatever it is that you have, and let's get started. The only important thing is just to have a range of different colors. You don't need a huge amount, but just having maybe, I'd say 10 different colors could be great to play with already. If I asked you what creative freedom represents for you, what would you say? That's the first question that I'm going to ask you today. For me, it's that sense of playfulness and detachment from the result and an embracing of the process. So today in our class, that's one of the things that I want us to focus on is embracing the process and finding ways to connect with your inner playfulness through color, which is an awesome tool to do that with, because who doesn't love looking at colors and playing around with them and seeing how they match, how they don't match. I just find that color is such an emotional language, and it really kind of reconnects me with that sense of freedom and joy that it is to experience color and to create something that wasn't there before. In order to start this exercise, I want you to pick a color. And I'm not going to ask you to think about it too much. What I really want us to practice here is tapping into our intuition, our inner knowledge, which I think that we have so much inner knowledge and that we've kind of accustomed ourselves to not really hearing it. And so sometimes it goes quiet and it's almost only a whisper. And so what I really want us to practice today is kind of reconnecting with those quiet little whispers that are happening inside. So one of the ways that I kind of do that is by, if I look at an array of colors, where is my eye getting pulled to naturally? Like I can already say, like immediately, as soon as I do a sweep with my colors, which I have here, immediately the one that drew me in was this one. And I actually have been practicing, tapping into my intuition for a long time. So if you don't have such a clear sense right away, don't worry, that's very normal. And it will get easier with practice. If you really have no sense of what color it is that you'd like to start playing with, that's fine. Just take a random one. There's no ifs or buts or right or wrongs in this exercise, but just try to keep in mind that you already have the answers within yourself. So we're going to start with this one color, and we're going to be just doing kind of like color explorations in a sense. I don't want you to panic. None of these drawings that we're going to do today are going to be finished pieces. None of them are representative of how terrible or wonderful of an artist that you are, though I have no doubt that you are absolutely a wonderful artist. But that's not the goal. The goal here is really to play and to connect with yourself through color. So I'm just going to go ahead and start working with the color that I chose. You can start with a simple shape, with a simple line, with a pattern. I want you to remember that the words doodling and scribbling, which we often use kind of in a negative way, actually are some of the most valuable keys for really connecting with your inner creativity. Because they really tap into this idea of process and of play. When you're doodling, when you're scribbling, you're not so much thinking of the result, you're really just enjoying what it is that you're doing at the moment. If at any point you start to feel, okay, I'd like to maybe just explore a different color to go along with this. Again, there's no right or wrong. There's no good palette or a bad palette. It's really all just about experimenting and finding things that you find fun together. So as I'm sitting here, I noticed my eye kept being drawn to this marker that I have up here, which is kind of like a corally orange pink marker. And so I'm not going to question it too much. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll just try this one then. And I'm going to try to place it along with this first color. I might like it, I might not like it. That's the fun part, you get to find out. And I have to say, I actually quite like it. It's a bit of a surprising color combo because this one is so bright and the other one is so muted, which means it's like less vibrant. But I find the mix really intriguing. As we've been working with these two colors, we've been experiencing something visually. What does this color that I'm placing on the page, what is it doing to me? How do I feel about it? What emotion or mood is it kind of emanating from that color? It's a very visual experience. And like I said, that's one of the beauties about color, is that even just by placing one color on a page, you can already kind of engage your visual sense and your sense of awe that this color even exists. I mean, remember that not everybody is able to even see all the colors. There are people who are colorblind. If you are colorblind, that's cool too. That means that you have your own personal experience of color. And I'd actually argue that we all have a subjective experience of color. So what is that experience that you're having with your visual sense? How are these colors engaging you in a playful, process-oriented manner? I want us now to focus on another aspect, which is the aspect of touch. And the reason I want to do this is because, we think of visual arts as being a visual language, obviously, which it is, and that it is, forms and shapes and colors and textures on a page, but it's also so much more than that. I really believe that an artistic practice is a bodily experience just as much as it is a visual experience. But I think that's something that's not often talked about when you're working on artistic pieces. We're not thinking about, our body, we're thinking about what it is that we're making on the page. And today I'd like to kind of bring you along this journey of finding ways of connecting your body and your art. So one of the ways that I love doing that is through focusing on how my tool feels. There are two ways that we're going to go about this. One of them is, what is the touch of that specific tool on your page? This marker has like a sort of like a resistance to it. But if I compare that to my colored pencil, it's a very, very different feel. And the vibration of your tool on the page transmits itself into your hand and thus into your body. And I find that when I'm able to really tap into the physicality of my tools, the process becomes so much more fun. It's one of the reasons that I'm always drawn to analog work. I love the tactility of it, the sensation of it. And the fun thing about it is that it's really something that you can come back to every time and still discover something new. It's a way of awakening your curiosity, the curiosity of your touch. So that's the first way that we're going to start engaging our senses, is by feeling different tools on our page. And maybe some tools you'll hate the way they feel on the page. That's great information. Then you'll know, okay, well, maybe I won't use this right now. Maybe I'll come back to it in the future and see if I still hate it or if my opinion has changed and now I'm able to embrace that feel or that texture. And then other times there are certain other textures that you're going to really enjoy. Each one of your tools transmits something different to your body. The second way that we're going to tap into our tactile sense is the feel of the tool in your hand. So no longer the feel of how that tool moves across your page, but how are you holding your tool? How is that sensation? How is your arm placed against the page? Or if you're on an easel, how is your hand being engaged in the process? I know that for these three, there's a very different feel between each one of these tools, whether it's the marker, the colored pencil, the Neocolor, and I also brought along my Woody, Stabilo Woody, which are actually kids art tools, but I love them because they're super chunky, super fun, and they just give me this sense of like playfulness and freedom and kind of big lines. And you can just go and have so much fun with them. Plus it's kind of cool, total aside, but you can make them wet and then they become kind of like watercolor, which is so fun. So there are these two ways. One, the feel of your tool on the page, how it also reacts to different kinds of paper, because different kinds of paper have different kinds of feels to them. How your hand is holding the tool and perhaps how you can vary it. What if you held your tool very lightly and played with that very delicate, subtle sensation? How is your arm engaged? How is your body feeling at this very moment? Do you feel relaxed? Have you gotten all tense because you're getting nervous about what it is that you're creating? If that's the case, step back, give yourself a nice, loving breath, and relax into your seat. I really think that the way that we engage our bodies when we're creating art makes a huge difference in terms of how we're experiencing that process. I know that when, for example, I get nervous about a piece that I'm making, I unconsciously kind of hold my breath and I grip kind of everything in. It's a very normal bodily reaction to stress. But so gaining awareness of where you're at in terms of your body, in terms of your breath, means that you can very gently start shifting it and tapping into a sense of peacefulness and calm and playfulness. Sometimes, if I've been like drawing for too long or I'm doing stuff that's super detailed, I'll realize at some point that I'm like this and I'm all crunched over. My back, it just doesn't feel good. So, when that's also the case, then why not, give yourself a little stretch? Actually, the best thing that I would recommend is to get up out of your chair. especially because nowadays we sit in our chairs for way too long. And I remember reading a study actually that said that for two people who spend the exact same number of hours sitting in a chair, there's a huge difference in like back pain between the person who sits continuously in their chair and the person who gets up every half hour or every 20 minutes. I don't remember what the amount was, but someone who regularly gets up, maybe to grab a glass of water, maybe just to walk around your apartment and come back to your seat, you know, just these tiny little things, just so that we remember that our art practice and our body are linked. And so if you're not tending to your body, then you're probably not really tending to your art practice in a way that is wholesome and holistic in terms of your experience of it. All right, so as you can see, I kind of decided to go into a tonal route where I'm like kind of working with colors that are all of the same kind of family, pink and orange, in various levels of vibrancy and different textures. Once you feel like you've had enough fun with this first little exploration, why don't we move just to another one? So I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier, where I'm just going to kind of loosely look over my tools and see if there's one that's pulling me in more than the others. Sometimes actually it won't necessarily even be a color. Sometimes it'll be a texture that you're looking for. For example, some days I will show up in front of my sketchbook and I'll be like, oh, I really want like something like graphite, or I really want something like a soft pastel. And that can shift at every moment. So if it's more of a texture, let's say, I guess I'm kind of feeling more, maybe my neo colors is a texture that I would love to have fun with. Then I'm going to start diving into, okay, well, now that I know the texture, which color am I going to choose? And I don't have a very strong sense, but I have a small sense that this one would be fun. This is just a gray color, but I really like it. So I'm gonna go in with that one and continue our exploratory journey. You can play with patterns, big shapes, small shapes, lines. And all the while remembering the engagement with the body and how you can change it and become curious with how it feels in different ways. When you're focusing on this touch, on the sensation, I want to make one thing clear, because I find that it's actually a very similar sensation to the one that I get when I meditate, or that feeling that you get when you're about to fall asleep. I remember, so when I started trying to meditate, I remember trying to concentrate really hard on my breath. And I was trying so hard that it was tense. And it took me a while to figure out that actually it's less of an intensity of concentration and rather a gentle leaning in. And so that's one of the things that I want you to keep in mind for all of the parts of our exercise today, is that these are all invitations. Gently invite an awareness into your body. Gently invite an awareness into the colors. Just like when you're trying to go to sleep, if you try too hard, it doesn't work. If you don't try at all, it also doesn't work. It's kind of that floaty in between motion of leaning in, allowing. I'm changing tools at a certain rate, but if you want to change colors or tools at a different rate, please do. For me, the important thing is that you're starting to tap into what it is that you want to create today. Sometimes you'll just enjoy one color and stay with that one color for an hour. Sometimes you'll be switching colors every minute. All of those are beautiful experiences. I'm going to mix in maybe some orange or yellow into this. Oh, I just broke my Neo color. I always do that. So, just gonna put this here because I can reuse that. And I have to say, for example, this is a color mix that I don't like. I don't know why. I'm not a fan of this orange next to these colors. So that's fine. What am I gonna do? I'm just gonna change colors. See if maybe by adding another color, I might like it a little bit more. So we've looked at our visual sense, and we've also tapped into our tactile sense. Now I'd like to invite you to tap into your hearing, which is also one of these senses that I think we don't think about enough when we're working with art. Obviously, it might be a little bit more difficult because I'm here talking to you, and so you're not able to necessarily completely engage with that sense. But I'd like to invite you to hear how your tool sounds on the page. Sometimes I like to draw with music, and that's another way of engaging your hearing sense. But also, there's something quite beautiful and precious about drawing in silence. And it's really just you, the tool in front of you, and how it sounds on the page. When I'm able to really access the flow state, which is that state where you kind of lose track of time and are completely immersed in what it is that you're doing, I find that all of these senses that I've been talking about really come together, and I'm connected to all of them at the same time. But again, that doesn't really work if you're trying too hard, and it's really about that allowing and the practicing. So with this added dark red, I like it a little bit better. Still not a huge fan of this mix in particular, and that's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to add a few other colors to see whether my opinion of it shifts. Sometimes it might be the proportion of colors that you're not liking. It's not necessarily the mix, but it's like, oh, I would prefer it if this color, there was more of this color than the other colors in my piece. And also you can, of course, always go back to a color that you've already used if that feels right. I do want to remind you though that these are all just explorations, experiments, and an opportunity to engage with yourself, with your artistic tools, and with your senses. As for taste, I wouldn't really recommend tasting your art materials. There's some pigments that can be toxic. So that's going to be one of the senses that we're maybe not going to be engaging with during our artistic practice. Though, if you have, you know, a little tea or a coffee to drink while you're making your art, that's one way of engaging that one. And of course, I haven't mentioned it, but there's our sense of smell. And again, maybe this is one that is maybe less relevant to our artistic practice, but sometimes you'd be surprised. I have a few handmade watercolor sets, and some people, when they make their watercolors, they use cloves as like one of the things to protect it from mold, I think. And so when I open those tins of handmade watercolors, there's this beautiful smell of cloves that comes out. And so that's also one way that you can start engaging that sense, is if you do have, you know, some art tools, you know, or even they used to have those markers that were like scented markers for kids. Who says that we can't appreciate that now? So that could be another way of engaging that one. I'm liking this balance of colors better than I did earlier. And you know, sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes you're not going to find a way to like it better. And that's fine. Remember, like, that's not the most important thing here. Really, we're just exploring colors, trying to see if there may be mixes of colors that you'd not tried before, that you'd like to maybe continue exploring. Or certain mixes that you're like, I'm not a huge fan of that one. It's all important information. All right. This color is calling to me very, very loudly, very clearly, so I'm going to continue with that color. And we're slowly finishing up on this exercise, but I still want to give you this reminder of the different senses that we've tried to engage today. Our sense of touch, of the tool, of how it's held in our hands, of the paper, of how the tools react with the paper, of our bodies, how tense or how relaxed it is. I actually, speaking of that, I did want to mention something is, you know, sometimes if I'm sitting in front of my desk for a long time, since my body will get stiff, sometimes I'll actually get up while I'm drawing, and I'll just like draw while standing up, or I'll put a pillow on the floor and I'll kneel in front of my desk, or, you know, I might stand up and use my easel. That's also, you know, a different way of engaging my body. So yeah, try to become curious about different ways that you can tap into your body and also respect it. Then we've also talked about our visual sense, of course. How are these different mixes of colors? Do you like them? What don't you like about them? Are there certain mixes that you're finding more appealing than others? That's the same color. I wanted something that was more... this one. Your sense of sound, your sense of hearing. How can you engage with that? Sometimes your sense of smell. And pretty much never your sense of taste. So one of the things as I'm making this one, I realize I really like the mix of this color with this color. So one thing I could also do is I've isolated that thing that I really engages me, so I might try another one where I just use maybe those two colors. What if I change the proportion and I put more of this gray blue than of that red? Become curious about what it is that you're pulled towards. What if I take that same mix and I add one more color to it? What if I add this initial one that I chose? See, now I'm discovering something interesting. As I was making this, I was realizing like, really not a fan of that color palette either. Not quite sure why. Again, it doesn't always matter. You don't always need to find an explanation, but it can be helpful to then see, okay, well, what are things that I might like in there? And then how can I push it further? If I take just these three colors, which were present in here, I really like this mix. So what that means is that gives me information about this. Maybe the colors that I didn't like in here are this dark gray one or one of these orange or pink ones. You know, so it's really about this kind of putting an investigator hat. And I mean that about every single part of the process. Become your own investigator. Investigate how you feel, how your tools feel, what colors are pulling you towards them, what mixes are you kind of shying away from, which ones are kind of like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for you to follow, and how can you lean in and follow them with your heart. It sounds corny, but I really, really believe that. So yeah, we're going to stop there, but I hope that you've managed to tap into a little bit of this playfulness, this curiosity that I believe is at the root of creative freedom. I truly believe that showing up in front of our sketchbooks each day with our little investigator hat, but also this deep relationship to ourself and our body and our senses, will really enrich and deepen your artistic practice. The reason that we do art is for ourselves first and foremost, and I know that's not the reason that everybody does that, but I really think that if we all did art with that in mind, that it is first and foremost for ourselves, to discover ourselves, that we'd have a lot more fun with the process, and we'd also make some beautiful discoveries along the way. If you'd like to continue the journey with me, you can also find me on Patreon, where I do live drawing sessions every month, also sketchbook challenges, sketchbook tours, and give you kind of a glimpse of behind the scenes, more personal vlogs and thoughts that go into my artistic process, art and life, how those are connected, and how your artistic process can really help you infuse a little bit more joy, a little bit more creativity, and a little bit more wholeness an acceptance of all the different parts of you into your life. Of course, you can also find me on Instagram, so if you want to be Insta friends there, I share kind of my daily little explorations, finished drawings, and everything in between. Thanks so much for joining in today, and I can't wait to see you soon.